What the heck happened to Chris Leben?
Leben enters the octagon for the 19th time.
Once a fan favorite, Leben was known for his iron chin, wild brawling style, and fiery personality.
That's the one that I want to beat, you know what I mean? So I always make him up to be like a giant in my head.
But as the years went on, Leben faded from the spotlight. So what happened? How did one of the most recognizable faces in MMA walk away, and where is he now? Let's dive deep into the highs, the lows, and the redemption of a true warrior. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, life was anything but easy for Leben. Raised in a troubled household, Chris found himself dealing with family issues that many wouldn't survive. The lack of stability, guidance, and support led Chris down a path of rebellion. Without proper parental guidance, he was, well, in his own words, a kid growing up on the wrong side of the tracks. But despite all the chaos around him, Chris found a way to channel his anger and aggression in a positive direction. In high school, Chris discovered wrestling, and that became his first outlet for the rage and pain that he carried inside. His natural talent for combat sports shined through, and he quickly became a standout wrestler. In fact, Chris was a state champion, dominating the mats with the same intensity he would later bring to the cage. Wrestling gave Chris a sense of purpose and structure that he had been missing from his life. After high school, Chris transitioned into mixed martial arts, not just because he wanted to fight, but because it gave him a way to direct his aggression into something positive. He joined Team Quest, a legendary gym in Oregon training under the respected coach Robert Follis. There, he worked alongside MMA icons like Randy Couture and Matt Lindland. It was here that Chris's natural brawler instincts were honed into a legitimate fighting style. His early career saw him tearing through smaller promotions like WEC, where he made a name for himself as a knockout artist with an iron chin. In Leben's early career, he showed his toughness and sheer determination. He racked up an impressive record, steamrolling opponents with his heavy hands and refusal to quit. His toughness wasn't just physical, it was mental too. No matter how bad things got inside the cage, Chris refused to back down. His resilience caught the attention of fans and promoters alike, setting the stage for the next big chapter in his career. In 2005, Chris Leben was selected as a contestant on the very first season of The Ultimate Fighter. This was a make-or-break moment for Chris, and he seized it with both hands. Tough wasn't just about fighting, it was about personality, charisma, and making a lasting impression, and Chris did all three. From the start, Chris was a lightning rod for controversy in the Tough House. His brash attitude, willingness to fight anyone at any time, and rough edges made him stand out. Fans remember iconic moments like his intense altercations with housemates Josh Koscheck and Bobby Southworth. The sprinkler incident, where Koscheck and Southworth sprayed him with water while he was sleeping outside, is still one of the most talked about moments in Tough history. But behind the tough exterior, we saw another side of Chris. His emotional outbursts revealed a deeply vulnerable person, still carrying the scars of his troubled upbringing. There were moments where Chris broke down, showing the world that his bravado was also a mask to cover deep pain. His transparency and honesty made him relatable to fans who saw him as more than just a brawler. They saw him as a human being, fighting battles on multiple fronts. Chris didn't win the Ultimate Fighter, but in a way, he didn't need to. His raw intensity and willingness to put it all on the line earned him something even more valuable: a UFC contract and a legion of fans who loved him for his authenticity. Leben's UFC debut came at the Ultimate Fighter 1 finale, where he defeated Jason Thacker with a brutal TKO. That victory was the start of a remarkable 5-fight win streak, where he took down tough opponents like Patrick Cote and Jorge Rivera. Chris wasn't just winning, he was doing it in a way that had fans buzzing. Each fight was a display of pure willpower, and the UFC knew they had a potential superstar on their hands. Chris Leben's fighting style was tailor-made for the fans. He wasn't one for playing it safe or coasting to decision victories. No, Leben fought with reckless abandon, always moving forward, always looking for the knockout. He was a stand-up brawler throwing heavy punches with the intent to finish, and his chin became legendary. Opponents would land clean shots, but Chris kept coming, absorbing punishment like few others could. He earned multiple Fight of the Night and Knockout of the Night bonuses for his all-action approach. Now, while Chris had many great moments in the UFC, some stand out more than others. In 2006, he faced the great Anderson Silva, who was making his UFC debut. Unfortunately for Chris, Silva's precision and striking were on a whole different level. Silva knocked Leben out in the first round, a humbling moment in Chris's career, but as always, Chris bounced back. One of his career-defining moments came at UFC 132 in 2011, when he knocked out Wanderlei Silva in just 27 seconds. And this wasn't just any knockout, it was a thunderous KO of a legend, and it reminded everyone that Chris Leben was still a force to be reckoned with. It was moments like these that kept Chris in the fans' hearts and cemented his legacy as one of the most exciting fighters in UFC history. But even as he racked up wins and bonuses, the cracks were starting to show. Personal struggles were beginning to affect his performance. The man who seemed unstoppable was starting to lose momentum, and losses to top contenders started to pile up. It became clear that something was off, and it wasn't just his in-cage performance. It was what was happening outside the cage that was taking its toll. You see, behind the scenes, Chris was battling alcoholism and drug addiction. He had spoken openly about how his troubled childhood had left him with deep wounds, and these demons followed him into adulthood. His substance abuse issues began to overshadow his accomplishments in the cage. And in 2008, Leben failed a drug test for the anabolic steroid stanozolol, earning him a suspension. In 2011, things got worse. He tested positive for painkillers oxycodone and oxymorphone, leading to another suspension. And these suspensions weren't just damaging his career, they were putting his health and well-being at serious risk. Chris was caught in a downward spiral, and the world was watching as one of their favorite fighters seemed to be unraveling before their eyes. As if the failed drug tests weren't enough, Chris also found himself on the wrong side of the law. He was arrested multiple times for DUI and other offenses, including an infamous incident where he spent time in jail. These legal troubles only added to the chaos in his life, and many began to wonder if Chris would ever be able to get things back on track. The suspensions, legal issues, and struggles with addiction took a heavy toll on Chris's career. His time away from the octagon due to suspensions and legal problems caused him to lose momentum. When he did return, he wasn't the same fighter. The toll on his body and mind was evident, and his performances began to suffer. Once a top contender, Chris was now seen as a fighter whose best days were behind him. The fans still loved him, but they couldn't help but notice the cracks in the armor. Despite all the setbacks, Chris refused to give up. He entered rehab and made multiple attempts to get clean and sober. He began to speak openly about his struggles with addiction, hoping that his story might help others who were going through the same thing. Chris's honesty about his demons resonated with fans and fighters alike. His willingness to confront his issues head-on and talk about them publicly was a testament to his strength and character. It was clear that Chris wasn't just fighting for his career anymore, he was fighting for his life. From 2011 to 2013, Chris's performances inside the octagon began to decline. He suffered 4 consecutive losses, and it was clear that the years of punishment had taken their toll. He wasn't the same fighter who could walk through punches and dish out damage. His chin, once legendary, was no longer as durable, and his body was starting to show the wear and tear of a decade spent in brutal wars. In January 2014, after a loss to Uriah Hall at UFC 168, Chris made the difficult decision to retire from MMA. It was a bittersweet moment for fans who had followed his career from the beginning. In his retirement announcement, Chris was honest about his struggles. He talked about the toll that drugs, alcohol, and personal demons had taken on him. He also expressed the regret about the way his UFC career ended, how he hadn't gone out on his terms, and that haunted him. But retirement was necessary. Chris needed to focus on getting healthy, both physically and mentally. The man who had once been a UFC star now had a new fight ahead of him. His fight for sobriety, peace, and a new life outside the cage.
My UFC career did not end the way that I wanted it to. Relationships, lifestyle choices, drugs and alcohol had really put me into a place where my heart wasn't in fighting, and I didn't finish my career out the way that I wanted.
Even after retiring from MMA, Chris wasn't done with combat sports just yet. In 2016, he signed with Bellator MMA, teasing a potential comeback. But medical issues, including a diagnosis of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a condition that thickens the heart muscle, prevented him from being cleared to fight. It seems like Chris's fighting days were officially over, until BKFC came knocking. In 2018, Chris made his debut in the BKFC. Bare knuckle boxing was a natural fit for his style. It was all about toughness, grit, and knockout power, traits that Chris had in spades. In his first fight, he took on fellow MMA veteran Phil Baroni and won via first-round TKO. It was like the old Chris Leben was back, aggressive, powerful, and hungry for a knockout. But his return wasn't without controversy. In a fight against Dakota Cochran, Chris lost a close decision that many felt he had won. Despite the loss, Chris's performance showed that he still had the heart of a warrior. He fought the way Chris Leben was meant to fight, hard, fast, and with everything he had. After a successful stint in bare knuckle boxing, Chris announced his final retirement in 2021. This time he meant it. He had fought his last fight, scored a first-round knockout in his final appearance, and was ready to move on. Chris was at peace with his decision, knowing he had given everything he had to the sport. His final fight was a fitting end to a career defined by grit, determination, and a refusal to back down. During his attempted comeback with Bellator, Chris was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, a serious condition that thickens the heart muscle and can lead to sudden cardiac death. It was a wake-up call for Chris, who realized that continuing to fight could have deadly consequences. The diagnosis was a blessing in disguise, as it forced Chris to prioritize his health over his fighting career. Years of fighting had taken a brutal toll on Chris's body. He had suffered multiple concussions, broken bones, and a litany of injuries that caused chronic pain. But the physical damage wasn't the only thing that Chris was dealing with. His struggles with depression, anxiety, and addiction had left scars on his mental health as well. In recent years, Chris has made significant lifestyle changes. He has been sober for several years, staying active in recovery programs and helping others who are battling addiction. He has changed his diet, focused on mindfulness practices, and adopted a healthier lifestyle overall. These changes have not only helped him physically, but have also brought him a sense of peace that he didn't have during his fighting career. After retiring from fighting, Chris transitioned into a new phase of his life as a coach and trainer. He opened his own gym where he mentors young fighters and passes on the knowledge he gained through years of experience. For Chris, coaching was a natural next step. He's passionate about helping the next generation of fighters avoid the mistakes he made and guiding them toward success.
But I kind of look at it like, when you're a kid, you go to school, then eventually you go out, you start your own family. You don't live with your parents forever, so.
In addition to coaching, Chris has also taken up a new role as a referee and judge in combat sports. He has even passed Herb Dean's reffing and judging course, a rigorous test of knowledge and experience. Chris's time in the cage has given him a unique perspective on what it takes to protect fighters while also allowing them to compete at the highest level. As a referee, Chris knows exactly what it feels like to be in the heat of the battle. His experience as a fighter makes him uniquely qualified to make the right calls in crucial moments. He is determined to ensure that fighters get a fair chance while keeping their safety a top priority. Chris has also become a motivational speaker, sharing his story of redemption and recovery. He has been open about his struggles with addiction, and his transparency has inspired many people to seek help. For Chris, helping others overcome their battles with addiction has become a major part of his life's purpose. He has turned his past struggles into a way to give back, and it is something that he takes great pride in. After years of estrangement from his family, Chris has worked hard to repair those relationships. He has reconnected with family members and found peace in his personal life. Chris's journey has brought him closer to the people that he cares about, and he's focused on being a positive influence in the lives of his loved ones. Chris Leben was instrumental in the success of The Ultimate Fighter and the UFC's rise to mainstream popularity. His wild antics, raw emotion, and unforgettable fights help make tough, must-watch television. Without fighters like Chris, the show, and by extension the UFC, might not have become the global phenomenon that it is today. Leben will always be remembered for his unbreakable fighting spirit. He was the definition of a fighter who would rather go out on his shield than quit. His never-back-down attitude made him one of the most beloved fighters in UFC history. Win or lose, Chris always gave everything he had, and that is something that fans will never forget.